I really do not like High School Musical, any of the three movies, to be perfectly honest, but I find the lyrics of the song Night to Remember particularly instructive here. So now it's official. Can't back out. Can't back out. Hey, it's Matt Mitchell, Alachua County editor of RedCounty.com with a new edition of Election Pulse Florida, and we're going to discuss the Florida Republican primary for the open U.S. Senate seat being vacated by Senator Mel Martinez next year. As expected this morning, Governor Charlie Crist, in a private announcement to the press and to the people of Florida, announced that, as expected, he would be running for Florida's open Senate seat as a Republican, believe it or not, and this race is going to set off a series of conflicts. One, it's going to set off a highly anticipated matchup between he and conservative former State House Speaker Marco Rubio of Miami, and it's also going to set off a series of primaries for both the governor's seat, potentially the Attorney General's office, and the Ag Commissioner's seat, and potentially some congressional seats as well if any candidates decide to run. What's this all going to mean? How's the primary going to shake out? Well, we'll discuss that a little bit today. There's going to be two big battles going on, under the currents, beneath the surface in this Republican primary race. It's more than just, two personalities going at it. Governor Crist and Speaker Rubio had their share of clashes. They have their own separate organizations, and they get by on their own. That is a component of party politics that you have to contend with. Different personalities having their own groups of people, their own bases of support, and sometimes those clash when you get to state-level battles for the heart and soul of a party, and that has the potential to be the case for this primary. Are Republican voters going to be comfortable with Governor Crist and his admittedly moderate ways? He's a self-described moderate Republican. His handling of climate change, his support of President Obama's stimulus package, homeowners insurance premiums, and his handling of the property tax issue have really engendered some dislike amongst conservative Republicans and a growing amount of mainstream Republican voters. So much so that a good chunk of voters, when polled as to whether they wanted him to stay in the governor's mansion or run for the Senate, there is a good amount, about 25-30% of Republican voters who feel more comfortable with him being at 700 North Adams Street than on Capitol Hill. How's that going to play out? What does he do, and what can he do to win the support of those voters, to shore up his base of support with Republican voters and make sure he can carve himself a way to victory in the primary, to what looks to be a pretty easy victory for him in November. Just his name being dropped in the recruiting process pulled out a lot of prominent Democrats to run for this seat. Congressman Ron Klein, Chief Financial Officer Alex Sink, Mayor of Tampa Pam Iorio said yesterday, I'm backing out of this. I'm going to stay mayor of Tampa and make up my mind later on. These big names dropped out because they knew that Crist was going to run, and they know he's going to just obliterate anybody who runs against him. But Rubio could stand in the way. He's very far behind in the polls, but he's got a few X factors in his favor. One of them is he's cutting himself a path as a conservative alternative, which helps him in the Republican primary, but he also has an edge in one of the things in which he is deficit, and that is, what attributes does he have to say to mainstream Republican voters, I can win in November, which is ultimately the question of a primary race for either party. The candidates are going to have to go to the voters of their respective party and say, not only am I the best representative for the party's values, but I can actually make it to the office to which we're seeking by winning in a general election populace. And those X factors are, one, Jeb Bush. While Jeb is probably going to stay out of this race publicly, it's just a losing proposition for him because he's loyal to both Rubio and Crist. Jeb was Rubio's mentor back in the 90s and early 2000s, and thus he has an inside track against Crist in terms of attracting fundraisers from Jeb and throughout the Republican Party of Florida organization that any other candidate would not have had. And while Jeb will probably not go public with an endorsement of either Crist or Rubio, he may privately go to donors to his past campaigns and say, Rubio's the guy, he's the man of the future for the party, I think you should vote for him. And Rubio has had success with this. He has recruited one of Jeb's top fundraisers already, and you can bet she's making calls all day today to, home builders, property managers, and all throughout the state saying, Rubio's the guy, let's not go with Crist, he's not the guy you're looking for. And you may see those efforts in culling Jeb's organization pay off for Rubio in the next few weeks, and keep an eye on his financial totals once the second quarter numbers come out. But again, Jeb is not as big an X factor as he could be, because this has the potential to be a nasty primary, and for a guy who wants to become more of a national Republican spokesperson, probably does not want to step on any toes and cause himself any trouble with his National Council for a New America, which is already having some issues with conservative voters. So he may prefer to just stay quiet and do his own thing, at least publicly. But private action counts for something too, and that'll be reflected in fundraising totals and polling numbers. And the other issue is his organization, Rubio's organization. He doesn't have the establishment support, obviously, that Charlie Crist is going to have, but he does have the single issue activists and county level activists who are a little more difficult to recruit, but if you have them in your corner, they can help in their own ways. And if it becomes a close primary, it's going to come down to whether his organization can go up against RPOF and Jim Greer and win. And if he does a good job of recruiting those folks and keeping them happy and getting them to knock on the doors, make the phone calls, and do their own fundraising, this could be a very interesting primary. But that is a benefit that's going to pay off a little further down the road, and not necessarily right now, when he needs to set up a message that's going to appeal to those supporters, but also reach out to mainstream Republican voters and say, look, I got the tools to win in November. You don't need to just go for Charlie Crist because John Cornyn and the National Republican Senatorial Committee said so. And how he goes through that struggle, how he puts that message together, is going to really define how well he improves in his polling numbers and competes against Charlie Crist both now and in the future. He released an ad today in response to Crist's declaration highlighting his Crist support of the stimulus package, and a classic political advertising meme of the morphing of one guy with another bad guy. Think the McCain-Bush hug in 2004. It was an effective ad, but it's not going to be what he needs to get the mainstream Republican support he needs to really get a boost in the polls and increase his credibility. He needs to tailor his message to that issue and also be able to credibly raise money. And that's going to be difficult because Governor Crist is a serious fundraising juggernaut. And that's the news for today. Next week, we're going to talk about the Florida governor's race, which has the potential to be very interesting. Attorney General Bill McCollum is likely interested in the news that's gone down today, and rumor has it that he's going to be making an announcement about his future plans as early as next week. So once we hear a little bit more about that, I'll talk about it and some of the other developments in that race. But a preview of that today, shortly after Crist's declaration, Congressman Vern Buchanan of the 13th Congressional District in Florida sent an email to his supporters saying he would not be seeking re-election to a statewide office and would be staying in the 13th District and running for re-election in 2010. So we'll talk a little bit about the impact that has on the race next week, and along with all the other players in the governor's race, both on the Republican and Democratic side. So until then, this has been Election Pulse Florida. I'm Matt Mitchell, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.